Right, we'll make a start then. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to this Magic Breakfast webinar. Breakfast Can't Wait, a spotlight on secondary schools. My name's Tracy Freeman and I'm the Business Development Manager for Scotland at Magic Breakfast. And today we have a fantastic group of panellists lined up to deliver an agenda, which we hope you'll find really interesting. If you've got any questions or queries along the way, please do drop them in the chat and there'll be a Q&A session following the presentations. We've also enabled access to live transcripts, so if you think that it will help during this webinar, then please do activate it now by clicking on the Show Captions button at the bottom and view live transcript. So I think that's all the housekeeping. So we'll just make a start by setting the scene. The latest government statistics now show that in the UK, approximately 9 pupils in a class of 30 are living in poverty, which is the highest in a decade. Magic Breakfast exists to ensure that no child or young person is too hungry to learn. And we believe that every child should have the opportunity to thrive and reach their potential. And so by providing breakfast at school, we help to overcome the unequal opportunity to learn that's driven by morning hunger. So why a spotlight on secondary schools? Well, research conducted by Leeds University in 2019 demonstrated that habitual consumption of breakfast was positively correlated with better GCSE outcomes. So we know that breakfast has a positive effect on academic attainment. But alongside that, the latest data Magic Breakfast receives from the partner schools tells us that the average number of pupils reaching out for breakfast every morning is 46% less than in a primary school setting. So we also know that it's much harder to engage secondary age pupils in a school breakfast. So that's why we want to tackle this issue together. We want to work collectively to optimise breakfast provisions in your area and enable more young Scots to benefit from it. So during this webinar, you're going to hear about a study that was conducted in secondary schools in Scotland during the last academic year. And this investigated what entices young people to engage with breakfast. This study also really captures the young person's voice by inviting them to co-create the breakfast offer. The second part of the webinar is for you, our audience, to consider how a local authority partnership with Magic Breakfast would benefit your area. Magic Breakfast realised that there is more need than we as a charity can support across Scotland. And so we invite you to hear about some of the successful partnerships we've developed with local authorities in England and ask you to consider whether this approach could help tackle child poverty in your area. So today's agenda looks like this. We've got Ben Dunn, our Head of Impact and Insights, starting us off with an overview of the secondary research project. Ben heads the team that researches school breakfast provision and its impacts and provides insights from other closely aligned sectors, such as education, poverty and food insecurity. And then we're going to get some insights from Inverclyde Academy with Jill McCluckie and Denise Crawford, bringing to life the experiences of a school who were involved in this project. Jill is our area manager for Scotland, and she manages the community engagement team who provide engagement support to over 80 schools across Scotland. And Denise has been a head teacher at Inverclyde Academy for 10 years and was one of the first schools in Scotland to receive Magic Breakfast support. We're going to then hear from Fiona Rinvalucri, our business development partner in England, who will take us through the positive impacts our local authority partnerships in England have had. Fiona is part of the business development team that works towards securing new business and managing existing partnerships with local authorities in England. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to my colleague to start us off. So over to you, Ben. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Hi, everyone. As Tracy said, I'm the Head of Impact and Insights at Magic Breakfast, and I'm just going to talk for about 10 minutes or so about a pilot study that Magic Breakfast ran with secondary schools in Scotland. As I'm sure most of us know, Any breakfast provision in Scottish schools is currently funded by local authorities or the schools themselves or third sector or private providers. However, in its manifesto for the 2021 elections, the SNP did make a pledge to provide free school breakfast to every primary school pupil and for all children in state-funded special schools in Scotland. It also pledged to trial free breakfasts for secondary school pupils, but has not yet done so. So part of this is, the kind of catalyst for Magic Breakfast, wanting to undertake research to inform our own delivery models in secondary schools, but also expand our reach, provide some evidence to share this with partners and with government to help understand and show what works and encourage some action in this area. So we commissioned Blake Stevenson, an independent research organisation, to undertake this research on our behalf and support the delivery of the pilot breakfast provision in 10 secondary schools across Scotland. The aims of the research project were to help identify barriers to secondary pupils engaging with school breakfast provision and to implement some pilots of different interventions to help overcome these barriers and ultimately increase the uptake of breakfast provision. We did also look at the impacts of breakfast provision, and Tracy touched on some of the research that's already out there just a moment ago. We know there's lots of research out there already about the benefits of school breakfast for things like pupil behaviour and concentration and attendance and well-being. Evidence of reduced persistent absenteeism and improved attainment. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to talk too much about those impacts here, but there are reports on the Magic Breakfast website if you are interested in those. And you're also welcome to drop me a message as well. I'm always happy to talk about the research and evaluation of Magic Breakfast and breakfast provision more widely. So the process for the pilot study is laid out on the right-hand side of your screen here. We started by conducting a literature review, which informed the design of the research and informed our discussions with schools around potential approaches for the pilot interventions. We also issued pre-pilot surveys to pupils and parents at all the participating schools to establish their knowledge and use of existing breakfast services and any ideas that they might have for improvements. And all of that data was gathered through the surveys and the literature review, and that helped to inform the co-production sessions with pupils and staff. So as Tracy touched on a moment ago, what was really central to the methodology of this research project was the involvement of the pupils themselves. They helped to inform and they helped to co-produce what they thought would be effective trials of breakfast provision in their schools. So ultimately, it was their ideas that were being put into action and trialed. And we did this across all of the 10 secondary schools that we were working within, both with groups of pupils, but also with the staff as well. And that helped us to ensure that the proposed activities fit within the individual school circumstances. So through our literature review and the fact-finding sessions with schools, we identified a number of different enablers and barriers to breakfast provision. Now, the idea of the pilot is that we try to overcome these barriers and also recognise some of those enablers as well. So this is just a bit of a snapshot. And as you can see, location of the breakfast provision, staffing capacity, funding and challenges with existing catering were some of the barriers that were faced by schools. And in terms of enablers, again, location, food, equipment, and SLT buy-in were some of those key areas that helped to enable effective breakfast provision. So as a result of the pilots, we ran testing different approaches to overcoming the barriers. We identified 5 key recommendations, which you can see here. Thank you. So just kind of running down the list, we know that a key enabler and a barrier is location. And what we found is that schools who incorporated the breakfast provision into their morning routine, such as offering grab and go models, pupils could come into the school and just grab what they want. That helped to increase the uptake. Likewise, if the breakfast was provided in a less accessible location in which people had to go out of their way to get something, there were much lower levels of engagement. And sometimes, this was due to the availability of space or the location of electrical outlets in school or having multiple school entrances. So grab and go was less effective because people were coming in from different areas. However, schools did try to overcome these issues, for example, offering a trolley service, which I'll touch on in just a second. But ultimately, making breakfast available in the areas of highest footfall was what really helped to increase the uptake. One of the other barriers that we saw was around staff capacity. Delivering the provision was sometimes challenging, and schools used creative ways to overcome this barrier, such as getting older students to volunteer as helpers in setting up and overseeing some of the provision. And this helped to alleviate some capacity issues and increase the engagement as well amongst the fellow pupils. Another key aspect of ensuring high uptake was to adopt multiple models of breakfast provision. So, for example, schools offering grab and go model or a trolley or tray service that moved around the school. Also, late provision for those pupils that are perhaps arriving after the morning bell. And really crucially to this was ensuring that all of these options were communicated both to the pupils themselves, but also to their parents. So there was increased awareness of the different breakfast provision models that were available. We also had some schools who would continue to make breakfast items available over morning break as well. However, it wasn't always possible due to some existing catering contracts that didn't allow schools to do this. So there were lots of different approaches to provision on offer across the pilot schools. But what we saw is that those who offered multiple models were the schools who saw the biggest impact on increased uptake of breakfast provision. The fourth recommendation is about ensuring schools have a varied food offer and the right equipment. Schools that were able to offer a wider menu saw increased uptake. We did see a positive relationship between the offer of fresh fruit and engagement from female students who, at this age, are typically less likely to eat breakfast. We also observed an increase in male students accessing the breakfast provision when there were more protein-rich foods available, such as eggs and cheese. Some schools trialed kind of new food approaches for pupils to try, such as testing out things like avocados and watermelons that help to just kind of stimulate some interest amongst pupils because of the novelty of the items. And we also saw that having some variation in the weekly menus, such as waffles or pancakes as a bit of a treat item on Fridays, that still met school food standards as part of the wider catering offer. But those kind of things help to encourage pupils to attend and overcome that initial apprehension of engaging with breakfast provision, and therefore made them more likely to come back, on the days where pancakes and waffles and so on weren't on offer. And in terms of the equipment, the food and support that's available from Magic Breakfast is provided free through the charitable offer. But there's still some funding issues that schools experience for equipment, slow cookers, microwaves, bagel cutters, and so on, all the things that you might need to run effective provision. And we're grateful that Magic Breakfast are able to provide grants for school equipment to help overcome some of those funding issues and help increase the uptake of breakfast. And we recognise that the schools who didn't have the right equipment initially were the ones who ultimately saw lower uptake. And finally, the fifth recommendation was about ensuring senior leadership buy-in. So schools who had the buy-in from SLT saw improvements in the uptake of the breakfast provision ultimately. This included support from SLT in allowing pupils to take food to their first lessons, being flexible about the mess that ultimately children cause when they're carrying food around school, and encouraging staff to support the breakfast provision, or perhaps rewarding pupils who volunteered to help, or applying for additional funding sources as well to support a wider breakfast offer. And when senior leadership was fully committed to making the breakfast provision a success and making it central to the school's morning routine, rather than perhaps, for example, just being spearheaded by one well-meaning teacher, the schools had much higher uptake. So just to summarize, before we hear about some of these things in a little bit more detail. Through the pilot approach, our aim was ultimately to identify a number of barriers and some solutions that could help schools overcome these. And for Magic Breakfast, the next steps are to take these recommendations forward with our innovation team and more robustly test the solutions at a bit of a larger scale to hopefully confirm some of the findings from this exploratory research pilot. Hopefully you found that useful. I appreciate it was a bit of a whistle stop, so I'm happy to take any questions at the end. But for now, I'm going to hand you over to Jill.
Thank you, Ben. That's great. Good morning, everyone. My name's Jill McCluckie. I'm the area manager for Magic Breakfast here in Scotland, based in Glasgow. And this morning we're joined by Denise Crawford, who is the head teacher at Inverclyde Academy in Greenock. So thank you for joining us this morning, Denise. We really appreciate your presence. So firstly, to give you a little bit of a background on the relationship between Magic Breakfast in Inverclyde Academy. School joined Magic Breakfast in April 2018, and they have been the most wonderful advocate for providing a hunger-focused breakfast free from barriers and stigma for their young people. The free breakfast offer is fully embedded at Inverclyde, and it's just really a way of life for their young people. Every morning they arrive at school and breakfast is readily available. It's an absolute joy to see. School are reaching over 20% of pupils on the number of roll each morning, receiving a healthy breakfast, and target pupil uptake is extremely high. As Ben mentioned before, that strong buy-in from the leadership team is vital. And that's what we've observed here with our work in Inverclyde Academy. The senior leadership team and staff truly believe in the difference that breakfast makes to pupil learning and well-being. They in turn have motivated, inspired their young people to get involved and for their voice to be heard. And as Ben touched on before, the pupils were actively involved in co-creating during the research pilot. This year, we're really excited to be working with school to deliver our community engagement strategy. This is to educate and empower the whole school community on the importance that a nutritional breakfast makes. That's including the staff, the pupils, and families of those within the community. We want to ensure that every young person, no matter what their circumstance, is well prepared for the school day ahead to achieve their full potential. And the start of this is just making sure that their stomachs are full and they're ready to engage in their learning. This year's school's designated engagement partner, Amy Robertson, will be working with Denise and the team to provide staff briefings, assemblies for the young people, and engaging with family events. So something very much to look forward to. So without further ado, I'd like to move over to you, Denise. There's a few questions about the research pilot that I'd love for you to share with us. So firstly, can I ask you, Denise, what did breakfast look like at Inverclyde before the project? Because I know there's been a few changes since. So if you could perhaps set the scene of what it was like before, and then we can talk about afterwards. Thanks, Denise.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we had been partners with Magic Breakfast over 5 years. So prior to the pilot, I would have said our offer was extremely good. We'd gone from a bowl of fruit in the reception desk out to a full breakfast, not just for pupils, and I think this is where the equity came in. It was across everyone in the building. It took away the stigma. So staff, pupils, families that were in the morning for meetings, everyone was entitled to a free breakfast. And that offer was fruit, bagels and toast. Some cereal and a wee bit porridge, Jill. It was run by a small group of pupils, supported heavily by key members of staff. And I think the pilot turned that on its head, and that was the main impact of the pilot.
Oh, that's really interesting, because I know, Denise, when I firstly became involved with your school, I was blown away because I walked into your street area. You can see from the slide here, that's the main street area in Inverclyde. And you've got, is it lockers up the middle of
Yeah.
the street area, and breakfast was always readily available out there in the morning, and it was beautifully displayed. It was absolutely fantastic. So can I ask you a bit more about what were the changes then? Because you already had a great provision. What changes were you asked to implement during the pilot?
So during the pilot gave us the opportunity to stop and think and engage further with our young people and their families. As I said earlier, it was a very small group of young people and they were mainly senior pupils who'd seen the breakfast increase over the years. And they were heavily supported by key members of staff, including our canteen staff. Now we've flipped that, and the pilot encouraged us to give them further leadership opportunities. They organised questionnaires across staff, visitors, and young people and their families to see what they wanted for the breakfast offer. So then we changed location, adding to the location, because as you said, we always had it in that large hub area. Some people come back and said we'd actually like somewhere to sit down and eat our breakfast rather than standing. So taking it away from the grab and go model. So we've now added two other further provisions of locations. We've changed the capacity because this small group of children have expanded with the core small group in conducting interviews and training for the wider group in the school. They've taken on stock taking and advertising, along with the operational daily tasks that they've always taken a part on. And we've grabbed this opportunity to make it an aspect of our educational offer. So these young people are now getting certification through the breakfast provision.
Oh, that's amazing, Denise. I think it's just so much more than just breakfast and nutrition. I mean, all the learning that's available through being involved with the breakfast provision and those life skills and upskilling our future workforce is just incredible. It really is. Can I ask you, how did they feel about being involved in the pilot?
They absolutely loved being involved in the pilot. The adults that came in from the research areas treated them with utmost respect, and I mean, their business meetings were a joy to behold, really. You would think they were sitting talking to groups of staff. It showed me, really opened my eyes about the capacity of our young people and the passion that they have, not just for a nutritious breakfast, but that nutritious lifestyle of eating. And that has permeated across the school. You know, when they're talking about eating now, they're talking about it in a totally different manner. I never thought I would see the day that my young people would ask me for avocados. If anyone knows, we were situated right in the heart of Larkfield, not an area known for its avocados. And now, that's the type of discussions we're having, how ripe the fruit is, and the strawberries aren't up to scratch just now because they're out of season. This is the discussions that we're having on a regular basis at Inverclyde Academy.
Oh, they're fantastic. I had a meeting recently online with your deputy head teacher, Mr. Livingston, and a couple of your pupils that are in the photograph. He had actually joined us, and he had to pop out of the meeting and left me to take it with the pupils. And they were so confident and they had so many great ideas. It's just amazing to have them on board. It really is. That's great to hear. So just to clarify, like for our audience today, so in terms of initiatives that you took forward, Denise, could you just bullet point those for me?
Yes, so we took forward at the initiative about location. That was the first thing that we looked at, and we've moved forward with that. We've changed the offer along with in line with what the children were asking for and the families thought were important. But we've taken forward that initiative of leadership and who is running this breakfast, and handed that straight back to the young people. So that's the three areas of initiative that we've been working on.
Right. So in terms of location, it used to be in the street area, but now you're moving more into the canteen area because your young people have suggested that they wanted more that space to sit and have a bit more of a sort of leisurely sit-down breakfast.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't call it leisurely because they are playing music, so Mrs. Crawford doesn't like that bit. I prefer the stand up in the street area, but we have the stand and grab and go in the street area. We have a sit down breakfast in the canteen area. where they're playing their own music and there's a rota around that. And there's also games out on the tables, so they get the chance to chat and get off the mobile phones. We've also got a quiet space for those children that struggle in the morning with the busy hub area. So they've got another room that they wanted set up that's just off the main street, so that's set up there. And we always had an extra provision for the soft start children who needed that extra support and discussion point with the pupil support teachers. So we've now got 4 provisions across the school.
Great. So it's very much as Ben had shared earlier, that's a mixed model approach that we would recommend to our Magic Breakfast schools, because as you said before, Denise, it's what's equitable for those pupils. You know, they're all going to have different needs, and some pupils might need that wee quiet space or that check-in with a member of staff in the morning. So it's providing what's going to suit each individual as well.
It definitely is.
Great. Just finally, Denise, can I ask you about a particular young person or a family who you feel benefited from breakfast? There was a real impact from receiving a nutritious breakfast during the time that you ran the pilot?
So there's many benefits of it, and you could go down any avenue with this. But I was speaking to a family just a few weeks ago, and we came back from the Christmas break, and the mum was speaking about the breakfast provision as one of the supports that the schools offer. This mum doesn't get any benefits. Children don't get free meal entitlement because of their lifestyle at home. Their mum's working, and the difference it's made to her being able to send the children knowing that they're going to get a nutritious breakfast. Now, a lot of teenagers love those noodles. We know the type that you put the boiling water in, and there is no nutrition at all. And she was worried about the standard of nutrition her children were getting, because she couldn't give them a lot of money to go to the shops, and they were tending to go towards that lower end food group. And so now she's not happy with them picking them up at lunchtime, but at least that she's not got the same worries, because she knows every day they're getting fruit, they're getting something wholesome, a bagel that's not full of sugar, they're getting scrambled eggs, which we're known for our scrambled eggs. So at least they're coming to school. Yeah, they're legendary. So they're coming to school with a need for hunger. They're getting it met at school. And then she's not having that daily fight that you need to buy something nutritious at lunchtime. But what she's finding is at home, they're now open to fruit and vegetables. She's not having to ballot it. But she is seeing them, they're having an array of fruit and veg. And when they're in the supermarket, they're actually asking for different fruits to be bought because they've sampled them at the Magic Breakfast. So she was thinking this was a wonderful idea.
Oh, fantastic. And I suppose that's like how families are obviously benefiting from that financial support. You know, families are struggling to make ends meet, as we know, with the cost of living crisis, but also from an impact from staff, what you've seen in the classroom.
Well, staff are noting that the children are coming to school on time, because before they would maybe go across to the shops, spend time in the shops buying packets of crisps and a whole lot of rubbish for breakfast. Now they're coming into the school, they're having a nutritious breakfast. The atmosphere of the breakfast, because we have a lot of children having breakfast, and it's not segregated from the children that don't want breakfast. The atmosphere in the school before that bell rings at 9 o'clock is warm and welcoming, and that's permeating into the classrooms. They're going to the first class with smiles on their face. It's as if we've already warmed them up for learning. They're ready to learn, they're happy, they're confident, they've already spoken to some adults. It's not that they're coming in and the teacher's the first person they're going to have a conversation with. We're warming them to learning, and staff are commenting on that. And also our attendance has gone up by 2% over the last 3 years, which is a huge gain. And obviously there's other variables in the mix with that, but I'm sure the Magic Breakfast is having a positive effect on attendance.
That's amazing, Denise. I mean, it certainly sounds like breakfast has been transformational for your school. It really has. And, you know, I can vouch for coming to visit you. It's such a nurturing, welcoming start to the morning. And, you know, it's just what you offer for your young people is just incredible. Just thank you for everything you're doing, Denise, to support our young Scots and make sure they're fed in the morning. And thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank
I'll
you.
hand over now to my colleague Fiona, who's going to have a chat with you about the value of partnerships. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Jill. That was brilliant. So lovely to hear what you're doing up in Inverclyde Academy. And congratulations, Denise, on such a wonderful breakfast provision. And you're doing great things, and that's fabulous. So thank you so much. That was really wonderful to hear. Well, my name's Fiona Involucri. I am working business development in England. I'm part of the business development team here at Magic Breakfast. And thank you for inviting me, Tracy, to the webinar. It is great to have this opportunity to talk to you about how we work in collaboration with local authorities to reach more children and young people with a healthy breakfast to fuel their learning. What I'm going to do is just give a quick brief overview of what we do, why, and share the impact and feedback from our local authorities. At Magic Breakfast, we value the partnership we build with both schools and local authorities because we've seen the positive impact of this on the lives of children and young people, and you've just heard it very much there. Research shows that breakfast is a low-cost, high-outcome intervention with a powerful role in overcoming economic, educational and health inequalities. Together, we can help tackle these inequalities, boost learning and improve attendance. And there's a stat that we have up there that highlights the need that we have for breakfast provision. The need for Magic Breakfast work remains high and widespread. This is a statistic actually from our friends at the Food Foundation, and they have a food insecurity tracker, and it comes from there. And it's 1 in 5 children are at risk of starting their day too hungry to learn. And I just want to also say that statistic earlier, 9 pupils in a class of 13 living in poverty in the UK is the highest number in a decade as well, just to bear that in mind as well. So let's crack on. Our current partnerships, as you can see there, we have 4 partnerships currently. We have one that's in its 5th year. We have 2 more that are in their 2nd year and one that we started last year. We have a mix of schools in these partnerships of primary, secondary, SEND and PRU and alternative provision. Excuse me. At the moment, we have 68 schools supported by Magic Breakfast through local authority funding. We have 9,701 children and young people eating daily, and over 1.8 million breakfasts served each academic year. So all the schools have been super successful in reaching an increased number of children and young people with our mixed models and our bespoke support and engagement. In a new partnership we established last year, in 4 months, the local authority saw an increase of 176% of children and young people eating breakfast each morning in comparison with breakfast provision in these schools before the partnership began. Our schools involved reported seeing a positive impact, and I've just chosen 3 that they talked about, was punctuality and attendance, children's readiness to learn, and children's physical and mental well-being. So local authorities recognise the vast potential of their investment in breakfast for both young people and the wider community, with families seeing reduced strain on household budgets and increased support for working parents. As I previously said, we currently have 4 partnerships in England, and when we initially engaged with them, they all had slightly different approaches and different agendas, obviously with the common goal of feeding more children and tackling child morning hunger. But they came to us and we engaged with them on different kind of reasons, different approaches. So 2 of those authorities were really keen to address food poverty across the borough. We had another authority that wanted to impact on household budgets and look at the cost of living and how breakfast provision supports that. And then our latest one wanted to provide concentrated support in one particular town in its authority. And we work with all of those to meet those needs. So our evidence-based research shows a positive impact of breakfast on a variety of priority areas for local authorities. And working within business development in new business, it's really important that we engage with all the different departments in a local authority. So we engage with public health teams that are tackling escalating levels of obesity and poor oral health, such as within the Healthy School programme. We've recently been at Basset Law Health and Inequalities Board, where we presented the importance of breakfast to them. We also work with education teams addressing poor attendance and persistent absenteeism. We recently did a presentation to Greater Manchester Combined Authority, where there were directors of education there, and where we talked about the impact of breakfast on those particular issues. And then we work with within the local authorities' child poverty strategies or food partnership strategies, and think about how we work within that and how we can tick the boxes for those particular things of importance within the local authority agenda. So we believe a personalised approach makes for success. Working with local authority teams and school leaders in an area, we can shape the partnership to meet each community's needs and priorities. So this is just a slide just to give you the nuts and bolts of what we actually do and what we provide. So we provide nutritional food that we deliver to schools, which is enough to feed all children. And this is vital to ensure a universal, barrier and stigma-free breakfast provision, to maximise the uptake and reach the children and young people who need it most with our mixed models. Now, the mixed models are there, and Denise already mentioned some of the mixed models, and she's operating 4 different models in her school. About 80% of our schools have more than 2 models. And this again is, we are hunger focused. We want to maximise impact and reach those children and feed those children. So you can just briefly see there, we've got our breakfast clubs, we've got our classroom provision, we've got grab and go. And then also, what's really important, I know we talk about attendance, but late arrivals too. We ask that there's some kind of breakfast provision there. That might be your bowl of fruit, it might be a basket of bagels, but we ask there, every child is important. We are an inclusive charity, and every child is important that they get the food that they need to get them through that morning. So there's our mixed models there, and schools can choose, and they can have the freedom to use which ones they want, as long as it's accessible and barrier and stigma free and universal provision. We also have engagement partners who advise and support schools so they can embed breakfast into the school day, helping them to overcome barriers and be effective. Our engagement partners also offer staff briefings, assemblies, breakfast visits. And we also have a school portal, and individual schools can sign in online and able to access a wealth of our resources to help them promote their breakfast provision. And we also provide impact reporting, which is super crucial and necessary to our local authorities, because they need to evidence our work. They're basically need to report back to our to their commissioning team. They need to report back to their councillors. They need to report back to their committees. And so we do impact reporting for all our partner schools, an annual measuring and monitoring survey, because we also need to know what schools think of us. And for our commission schools, we kind of have a sort of as and when they wish to have the advice, because we obviously, they need to talk about it when they need to talk about it and feedback. So yes, we do that as well. Can I have the next slide, please, Claire? So we love data, and we're always making the case for breakfast, and data is essential to collect from school, but equally so are the quotes and narrative from the staff and their school community. Just hearing there the wonderful stories from Denise and Jill, it's so important to bring it alive. And our local authorities like to hear those stories too. And with a couple of examples here, from our local authority schools that we've just chosen. We've got one here on punctuality and readiness to learn. I'm not going to read it out. You can read that for yourselves. We also have our measuring and monitoring survey on our website, and also we have our wonderful annual report as well. So you can read some more quotes in there if you're interested, and also check out our website. This one says we ask not just the staff, we want the staff as well, that's important, but we ask parents and also children and young people about what they feel about our breakfast vision. And I'm just going to leave you there with that one.
And this is feedback from one of our local authorities. We work with Hammersmith and Fulham. And this really sums up what we're all about, that we work together to support local authorities. We kind of like local authorities are one big jigsaw, and we're just one jigsaw piece that fits in. So Magic Breakfast values of hunger-focused provision and targeting children who are vulnerable to food insecurity was very important to us, as well as their vision of no child too hungry to learn. Magic Breakfast brought this, as well as food, and a huge amount of experience to this space. Thank you. So I just want to end with what we'd like to end, which is ending child morning hunger for good. At Magic Breakfast, we are advocating for long-term change, and we remain committed to supporting more children and young people in schools across England and Scotland. We are looking to expand our geographical footprint and grow our partnerships with local authorities to deepen our presence in communities. Funding from commissioned income means that there is a potential for every child across your area to access a free and nutritious breakfast. This means that more children who are struggling with morning hunger will be reached, whatever the reason and irrespective of the SIMD levels in the school they attend. And I just want to end with a quote actually from our annual report. We're transforming lives one breakfast at a time, but Magic Breakfast cannot end child morning hunger alone. It's only together as a community that we can build a healthier and more equal society. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your time. I'm going to pass you now back to Jill, who has contact details. Pass you back, sorry, to Tracy. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, bless you. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Fiona. And thank you to all our panelists actually for a really insightful content, which I hope you've found helpful. So we've got a few minutes for some questions. So I'm just going to pause there and actually ask probably all the panelists to come back on camera, if I may. Yeah, we've got a few really good questions actually. If I can direct perhaps the first one to you, Fiona, there's a question around the partnership examples sound very interesting. How are local authorities typically funding these?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question, Tracy. Unfortunately, there's no one size fits all, and I wish I could say, oh, they're doing it this way. This is where you get the money from. This is what you do. No, we're all aware of how tight budgets are for councils, and there is a variety of funding streams that have funded our partnerships with Magic Breakfast. Some of our local authorities have used cost of living support through using some of the household support grant, or through public health initiatives as part of a wider food strategy. So remember, I was talking sort of about a jigsaw and how we fit it in. They've sort of thought, oh yeah, we can fit you into that. We've got some money for that. We can afford that. Other local authorities, and this actually, the more I speak to local authorities, the more that are actually doing this as well. They've used some kind of community funding to support it. There's two local authorities that we are speaking to at the moment that are kind of making their own community charity pot almost, and they're using kind of like the stakeholders that they may have. One authority has an airport that's near them, and they're putting money into it. And then some other stakeholders putting money into it, and that is funding some of their provision. So yeah, so it's all different, and different local authorities come in at different angles. I guess it's just the question of their priority and where they can find the money.
Thanks, Fiona. That's great.
No worries.
There is also quite a meaty question around Scottish Government's recent announcement of the Bright Start Breakfast programme in this year's budget, and what effect do we anticipate this having on Magic Breakfast in Scotland? So I'm happy to take that. Magic Breakfast obviously are celebrated enormously, this announcement. It's a really great step forward in breakfast, in making breakfast accessible in Scotland. The £3 million allocated to this, we realise this amount will not establish breakfast provisions at every primary and ASN school in Scotland, which was our government's original promise. I think the costed figure was over 28 million to do that, but it's obviously a step in the right direction. I think right now we're welcoming any opportunity to support how this money is going to be spent to achieve maximum impact, so that breakfast obviously delivered in a hunger-focused, stigma and barrier-free way. And there's also a question around what's going to happen after that programme ends. So we're going to be advocating and campaigning for all parties to make the commitment in their 2026 manifestos for a universal breakfast provision in all schools. Obviously, in the meantime, what's it mean for Magic Breakfast? Well, we're going to continue to support all our partner schools with breakfast food and support so that our children and young people at these schools are not at risk of morning hunger. So I can see that we're running out of time. For those that have submitted more, there's other questions. We will address all these and in the follow-up email that you'll receive with a recording of the event. So bear with us, and apologies, I've not been able to address them all. Final slide, just highlighting this call to action slide. It has all the contact details that you will need on it. So if you're a local authority and you want to know more about a partnership with Magic Breakfast, please use this lascotland@magicbreakfast.com email address. And if you're a school and you'd like to know more general information about Magic Breakfast, please go to our website, www.magicbreakfast.com, and you'll also find details on how to follow us on all the main social media platforms here. And finally, we're working towards a relaunch of our Breakfast Can't Wait campaign later this year. And whilst we're aware of the Scottish restrictions around getting involved in these things professionally, we would like to invite you all to join our campaign list in a personal capacity. So please do use this QR code and you can get more information on this as well. So all that remains, and I apologise for going a little over time, is to say a big thank you. Especially thank you to all of you who joined us today. Thank you to our great panellists. And thank you to those who have helped behind the scenes. You know who you are. So goodbye for now, and I hope you have a very good rest of the afternoon.